This is Between the Brackets, a MediaWiki podcast, episode 51, January 7th, 2020. Hello and welcome to Between the Brackets. I'm Yaron Koren. And my guest is Richard Evans, who is an electronics engineer for the NASA Glenn Research Center. Now, I've already had people from NASA on this show. They were Darren Welsh and James Montalvo of the Extravehicular Activity Group at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, whom I talked to back in 2018. Darren and James and the rest of the EVA guys already get a lot of publicity in the MediaWiki world. They get invited to the private conferences, the Wikimedia Foundation people write blog posts about them, and all that was even before they helped bring about the first edit to Wikipedia from space, which happened just 2 months ago. But Rich is from an entirely different group with an entirely different set of wikis that just happens to be part of the same organization, NASA. I think he's never been invited to one of those private Wikimedia events, but then neither have I, so it's okay. I think it'll be interesting to hear both the differences and similarities in what he's doing. Richard is also the main organizer of the upcoming EMWCon, which will be held in early April in Sandusky, Ohio, just across the street from the Plum Brook station where he works. So this episode will also double as a plug for that conference, which I'm also planning to attend. We'll be talking about that later on. Anyway, Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Yaron. Thank you very much for having me. I've listened to a number of the podcasts, and I want to congratulate you for doing this. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. That's great to hear. So you work in Sandusky, Ohio, and you're planning a conference there. Do you also live in Sandusky?
I live about 10 miles south of Sandusky. So for those that know Ohio, it's known by sort of lots of tiny little villages and towns separated by lots of corn and cows. So we're out in the country, and I'm from about 10 miles south of Sandusky.
Oh, very good. Yeah, that's real America, as I call it. So Sandusky is where the Plum Brook station is located?
That's correct. Plum Brook Station is one of two campuses that make up the NASA Glenn Research Center. NASA Glenn is an Ohio field center of NASA. Many people are familiar with the Johnson Space Center in Texas, Kennedy in Florida. For those that really follow space, they would know that there are roughly 10 field centers, and NASA Glenn is one of those in north central Ohio. The main campus is near the city, near the airport, and Plum Brook Station is a satellite campus about 50 miles west, where we do large-scale spacecraft and satellite testing, and we do so with the benefit of 10 square miles of sort of a safety buffer, so that we can work with hazardous materials, propellants and fuels, and lots of things that are not good to have too close to an airport or too close to a city.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Your state, Ohio, has a very interesting connection to aviation in general. The license plates from Ohio all say birthplace of aviation because the Wright brothers were from there, and then a whole lot of astronauts were from Ohio, including Neil Armstrong and John Glenn, whom I think Glenn Research Center is named after. Is there any connection between the presence of the Plum Brook Station in Ohio, or the presence of the Glenn Research Center in Ohio, and all those people?
I don't think that there's a connection, a point-to-point connection. No, the origin of NASA Glenn is that in World War II, the American war effort took a lot of land from local farmers in the Midwest in order to produce ordnance in preparation in support for the war. And so Plum Brook Station was originally managed by the Army as a 6,400 acre ordnance factory for the American war effort. And at the end of the war, we no longer needed those kinds of facilities, and the government was beginning a new space program. And so they gave much of the land back to the local farmers, and some very strategic locations, specifically Plum Brook, they held on to because of their proximity to Lake Erie, access to the water, access to the railway, and then Plum Brook Station was given over to the Space Agency for the development of nuclear propulsion.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, there used to be a nuclear reactor there.
Yes, Plumbrook Station was the site of the space agency's only uh, NASA built, NASA operated nuclear reactor, and they used it to discover how materials and properties are affected by high radiation. So that when they go into space, into service, there's no surprises. We need to figure out how materials transform and behave in the harsh and extreme environments of space.
Wow. Um, so there's something very cool happening right now there at sorry at Plumbrook Station, which involves the Orion spacecraft. What's going on with that?
Well, thank you for asking. We're very excited about the work that we're doing right now for the human spaceflight program. So, for those that follow human spaceflight, most people may recall that the Space Shuttle program was retired in 2011. And the agency has transitioned that budget. The money that was being spent on the shuttle program has been diverted to the next generation exploration vehicle. In a perfect world, we could have developed this vehicle while we were flying the shuttle, so that we could have started flying the new vehicle right when the shuttle retired. However, in the reality of a fixed budget, we had to shut the shuttle program down in order to begin developing the Orion spacecraft and all of its many other parts. So here we are in 2020, and the Orion spacecraft has been developed over the past 10 years, and it is being tested in our Space Environments Chamber for the final verification of its capabilities before it will be launched I think the current schedule is early 2021 will be the first flight of the Artemis program, Artemis 1, and it will mark the beginnings of American astronauts going beyond low Earth orbit and out to the moon, and paving the way for exploration beyond the moon.
Wow. Yeah, well, that brings me to. I want to ask one other, non-wiki, general, I guess, space question. I was thinking about it. I mean, in 1969 was when the first man walked on the moon. That was Neil Armstrong, whom I mentioned already, from Ohio.
Right. Yeah.
Then over the next 3 years, there was just a flurry of missions to the moon. 12 more people landed on the moon in that time, all Americans. And then it all just ended. No human has been on the moon since 1972, which is almost 50 years ago.
Right.
There have been a fair number of robots, but the usual explanation given for that, from what I understand, is that the late 60s were a special time because it was the height of the Cold War and the space race. And so the short explanation is, after it became clear that the U.S. could land lots of people on the moon while the Soviets couldn't land anyone, there just wasn't any more need to do it. Do you have any thoughts on all of that?
Oh, I have so many thoughts. Where to start? You'll hear lots of people answer this question in lots of different ways. The way that it makes the most sense to me is that what NASA cares about is learning how to live and work in space, ultimately to expand the realm of human activity, human commerce, everything that we do as a species. Ultimately, the long-term vision is to be able to include the solar system into the things that we do as part of our civilization. Now, the big problem, the big gap between what we did in Apollo and everything that I just spoke of is the exposure. So for a few astronauts to do a quick run out to the moon, do some, maybe a few days worth of experiments, and then get home, ultimately the health impact of the exposure once they leave the safety of the Earth's magnetosphere, the long-term effects of the exposure of space were unknown. And so the end of the Apollo program was the beginning of the International Space Station, which was originally meant to be an American-only orbiting base, permanently manned base, where NASA could then begin to do all the experiments that would teach us everything that we need to know, which is quite a lot, about how to live and work for prolonged durations in space. So the names escape me, but I think one of the last major accomplishments, scientific accomplishments on the ISS was the twin study. And I forget the names.
Oh,
yeah. And
Scott Kelly and Mark Kelly, something like that.
I will trust your judgment.
Okay.
So that sort of wrapped up. That was sort of like the capstone health experiment that allowed us to validate our understanding of what the long-term health effects are of living and working in space. And so with that knowledge, we're now ready to begin doing all the amazing things for a prolonged presence, so that when we go back to the moon, we're not just going back as a stunt, we're going back to stay.
Yeah. So, away from space stuff, onto you. Obviously, you're involved with wiki stuff, but what is your actual job?
Okay. So my background is electrical engineering, applied physics, and computer science. So I started out my early career as an electrical engineer, doing instrumentation and controls for the Department of Energy on 2 particle accelerators that we were building in Newport News, Virginia. And for those that are interested in learning more about that, it's the Thomas Jefferson National Accelerator Facility. Oh. It's a continuous electron beam accelerator, and we were using that technology to develop tunable high power lasers for the Office of Naval Research. And to that end, I know that's a mouthful, and to that end, we were doing, I was involved in a lot of embedded programming. So it was the early 90s, and we were building devices that were using lots of programmable logic devices, and the electronics drawings for circuit boards and for chassis wiring, all of that had a wonderfully mature process for how that would be documented and managed. But for the embedded software, there was virtually no established way of handling that. And so I was looking for content management software that would allow me to upload source code, VHDL and ADL programming that was going into all of these programmable devices in this large experimental physics machine. And so I found, I at the time I had developed something entirely on my own in PHP. But then what I realized was that getting something like MediaWiki, which I discovered after probably about 3 or 4 years of building up my own complete application software, I discovered MediaWiki and quickly realized that I could offload all the time that I was spending on managing my own software and benefit from this fantastic off-the-shelf, free and open source content management software.
Yeah. Well, but when you're not doing MediaWiki things, what do you do? Or at this point, are you?
Okay. So
all the time.
No, that's so I'm an electronics engineer, and I do instrumentation and controls and data acquisition for the large scale space environments chamber. So at Plumbrook Station, we operate the world's largest thermal vacuum chamber. We have the world's largest reverberant electromagnetic interference test chamber. We have the world's most powerful vibration table and the world's most powerful acoustic chamber.
Wow.
And if you'll forgive me for saying world's most too many times, I would encourage anyone curious to do some quick searches on the web, learn about Plumbrook Station. And our mission is to recreate the harsh environments of space on the ground. Yeah. To find out, to verify that the devices and the satellites and the spacecraft that we're building to go into orbit will be able to perform as expected. So if they're going to fail, I think of it as a torture chamber for spacecraft. Customers build their satellites and their spacecraft, they bring them to us, and we do everything we can to see how they'll perform in space.
Wow.
And I do data acquisition. So primary job is to manage the data systems that collect all the data from these tests, and I also am the technical lead for the electromagnetic interference testing.
Yeah. Wait, can you say that last part? Technical lead, I think it got chopped out a little.
Okay, I'm the technical lead for the electromagnetic interference testing, which means that we basically subject spacecraft to high levels of radio frequency energy, and we look to see if we can cause system upsets. We see if we can get the computers to fail, and if we can get the control systems to not function properly due to these high levels of external radiation. So the goal is to prove that the spacecraft is hardened against these kinds of interferences.
Yeah. That's interesting that you're essentially trying to destroy other people's hard work.
Well, we use the soft word of to create an upset. But I like the way you said it.
All right. I'm not sure which sounds worse, actually.
Right.
Let's see. So yeah, you mentioned how you got started with MediaWiki. I've actually known you for a long time on the internet. Anyway, I searched in my email and I saw the first email you sent me was back in 2009. So I know you've been using MediaWiki at least that long.
Yeah.
Do you remember when it was that you first set up MediaWiki?
Well, it probably was 2008.
Yeah.
And I think it was when the real epiphany was, so I think maybe around 2006, I discovered MediaWiki and was sort of using it, was learning about it. But the first time that I put it to work was probably around 2008. And one of the things that I was completely taken with was the page forms extension, the semantic MediaWiki extension, and the ability to not have to have a traditional database, or that the traditional database is abstracted at a level that the users don't need to know about, and that you could literally capture data in the pages themselves, and then you could do inline queries, and the semantic results formats, and the page form, and the ability to use page forms to collect data and semantic results to display data. I looked at that and I thought, my God, this is resource planning software, and as it evolves, it's going to outperform, in my opinion, the commercial for-profit products that claim to do this, that enterprise organizations are paying dearly for. This is a platform that with just a little, with just a little bit of a willingness to learn how to do it, it's really unlimited, the amount of data processing that you can do with semantic MediaWiki plus various extensions.
Yeah, that's cool that you saw the promise of the software that early on. Yeah, I guess you could say the last 10 years have been, us, the developers and community members, trying to convince other people of what you're saying now.
Right.
Yeah, it remains underused, as I'm sure you'd agree.
Yeah.
But that's great. So what kind of information have you put on the wiki?
Well, originally it started out as an inventory management system, where I created a form that allowed me to have users enter in any product, any piece of inventory that we kept. And so, as you can imagine, our facilities are locations, and then in those facilities we have systems, and then those systems are comprised of elements, and so the elements, even the elements at that level, are really just sort of an abstract list. I need 3 network switches. I need 7 pressure transducers, and so the idea is that at this point we really haven't mapped it to actual inventory that has serial numbers. So if you're an engineer and you're designing the system, I have used Semantic MediaWiki to define the system, to define the subsystems, and to define all of the generic system elements and how those system elements are connected to each other in like a big nodal graph. And then once you've done that, then there's this other part of the wiki, which is inventory management. And so in this part of the wiki, inventory managers, when we do new procurements, when we're getting rid of equipment, we can keep track of all the stuff that we have and where it's located, and serial numbers, make, manufacturer, links to the product manuals online, specific notes on how we use these things. And then once you have these two completely separate things, an abstract system model, a system modeling system, and an inventory management system, then you can build the links between the two.
Right.
And you can say, well, for network switch number 1, I'm using this particular link sys router. And, and then, if in the middle of a test program, we have to change it out, then the technician can replace the equipment and they can update the system model with the new inventory, and the old piece of equipment is still in the inventory, as was the new one. And the only difference now is that we're now keeping track of what role the equipment is playing in the systems. And then this allows me to build automated reports, so I can get end of shift reports on what equipment was modified, end of the week, end of the month, end of the year type of roll-ups of equipment that was modified or how much work was done. So where I'm going with all of this is to try to model all of our business practices with the semantic tools, model all of the data products that we create in the tools, and then the long-term vision is to be able to do auditable traces, to be able to say at the end of every month, at the end of every quarter, how much time and money we've spent on this or that, to be able to advocate for funding to do future work or to continue to do proper maintenance. It's resource planning. So basically, everything that you learn in business management on resource planning, I'm doing it in the wiki.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So-called ERP. I'm just finding out. I mean, about the whole world. One common theme on this show among people who run wikis for their company is that they started out using MediaWiki for one specific purpose, and then it just kept spreading in scope as people or users or the original admins found out, realized all the benefits and all the kinds of data that can be put into it. Was that the case for you? Yes and no. What I will say is that my mind sort of saw the potential real fast, and in fact, what was sort of an awakening for me was that some of the extensions weren't as well developed as I was imagining they could be. So, my problem is I look at the extension world and I think, wow, in another 5 or 6 years, all these features could be added, and it would it would outperform anything. So what I've been trying to do actually is figure out the limits of what I can do with this. Right.
And I'd say maybe the only real problem, there's only 2 problems that I would say I really struggle with. And one is communicating what this can do. A lot of my colleagues, they know me as the wiki guy, and I really, want them to know, no, it's not just a wiki. The wiki is the platform that the enterprise resource planning stuff works on. And so communicating that has been a challenge, because most people think that a wiki is, what's the famous definition of a wiki? The simplest online database that works.
Right.
where you just write little encyclopedia articles about what you know. And I would say that that's really kind of the least of what we do. The most of what we're doing is modeling our business processes, and part of that modeling process involves identifying the data products. And so things like procurements, things like inventory, things like statements of work, procedures, all of these things become articles, and all of them have a set of semantic properties that link them into a larger model.
Yeah. It's true that the word wiki is not ideal for what this is, but I don't know of a better one.
Right. Well, I think ERP is probably, like, my resolution for 2020 is to stop calling it a wiki.
So what would you call it, an ERP system?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the semantic. It's an open linked data semantic ERP. But wiki sounds so much easier to say wiki.
Yeah, I'd cut that down a little. Not to critique your resolutions, but
right.
It needs a little more. Yeah, absolutely. Some kind of way of making it clear that it's not really about the free text stuff anymore.
Right.
Although I'm sure people see all that it does, in that all this information is now being stored and accessed on the wiki.
Yes, and so slowly by slowly, I get converts. There's not a single person that has gotten involved and hasn't become an advocate.
Huh. Actually, how many people are using? Is it all? Do you have one MediaWiki instance, or is it more than one? And how many people are using it?
Back in 2009, when I first reached out to you, I was running multiple instances, multiple MediaWiki instances, and each one was being managed separately. I was just really doing it the brute force way, where I would create a folder on the web server and create a new version. And so every version was its own. All the updates had, each one was being maintained as its own entity. And that was when I bumped into, you had mentioned James Montalvo and Darren Welsh earlier, and I was out on the forums, and I was, trying to figure out how to do this smarter. And they reached out to me and said, "Hey, we saw that you're working with multiple wikis, and you need some help, and you might want to check out this Mesa program that we're working on, which is an Ansible script that does the automated deployment and management of a MediaWiki farm."
Right.
And so once I got involved in letting Ansible manage a farm of wikis, then everything is just started to become much more straightforward, and I can work less nights and weekends on managing the wikis, and focus more on my day job of test engineering.
Yeah. So how many wikis are there?
I'm running, I think, roughly 12 right now.
Oh, wow.
Some of them are retired, but when I retire them, they get frozen, but they're still there for historical purposes. We have broken down, like, at the top wiki is a commons. It's open to all NASA. It's not accessible from the World Wide Web, but if you happen to be a NASA employee and you're on the NASA internal network, then anyone in the agency, whether you're at Johnson, Kennedy, JPL, or Langley, any of the NASA field centers anywhere in the country, and anyone from NASA who's connected like I am through a VPN would have access to the Common Wiki. And the Common Wiki is where we is sort of like our storefront for Plumbrook Station. And so when we want to let people know what good things we're up to and what's happening, we use PB, Plumbrook General. And then I begin to start whittling back my access control list from there. The next one is organizational only, and that contains our policies and procedures as an organization. Then I have facility-specific wikis, so that the actual data products produced by the individual test sites are not commingling in the same wiki, and that's important for the people that work on those test sites.
Yeah. And how many people are using these wikis?
Well, I think
roughly.
Yeah, so I did a check. I think I use the create user extension, which allows me to because it's an enterprise environment. I have my authentication is integrated with SAML. For security people, they'll know that basically when a user visits my site and they're on the NASA network, their identity is guaranteed to be known. So I don't have unregistered users. All my users are already registered when they show up at my door, and that allows me to keep track of all my user activity. And so I think I've got something like between 300 and 400 users in my Plumbrook general site, and I've probably got 100 users in the test site specific locations. And I would say within those, I probably have about 15 users that are using the wiki every day, relying on it every day for new information.
Yeah.
So in short, about 12 wikis, each of which has about maybe 10 or 15 core users, has an audience of at least 100 people, and the main general wiki has an audience of maybe 400 or 500.
Cool. You've done some interesting custom data structure work on your wiki. One of the things that enterprise MediaWiki users often say is lacking is some kind of workflow setup, where, for example, a page can have some kind of status field, and as the status changes, different people get notified. Control of the page might get handed over from one person or group to the next.
Right.
There's no one extension that handles all of that, although people have created different workarounds to handle different subsets or variations on that. In your case, from what I understand, you basically needed a lot of people to be able to sign off on a certain page.
Right.
So you created an interesting setup for that, which I saw you demonstrate at the last EMWCon, and I'll have a link to the video of the talk for that from the episode page. Mm-hmm. It's on YouTube. Your solution involves a combination of approved revs, semantic MediaWiki, page forms, a few other extensions, plus some custom JavaScript, I think for display purposes.
Right.
How is that working out?
Good and bad. So what I realized after that presentation last year was that there were some very subtle. One of the things that I rely on is an extension called extra special properties. And semantic extra special properties takes things like the approved revision status. So the extension approved revisions will allow the revision status to be listed as a semantic queryable property. And what I found is that some combination of extra special properties or approved revisions was not reporting faithfully, and it sort of killed that project. However, I'm very, very excited to say that, and I can't think of the names of the developers, but I know that there's a forthcoming semantic MediaWiki release 3, or whatever the most recent version is, has the fix that I need. And so I've worked in the forums with the guys. I've put all the issue and the bug reports in, and the semantic MediaWiki community is delivering on updates that will solve all the problems for me. But unfortunately, my wiki farm is production, and I can't just go in there and on my own time update it as I want. So I'm eager to update my wiki farm from MediaWiki 30 to MediaWiki 1.31. And when I do that, I'll be able to get the latest versions of all the semantic extensions that will make that system that I implemented function as I envisioned for multiple signatures, so that you can have a wiki article that is validated by multiple users in an organizationally defined way.
Yeah. It sounds like I may be involved in. I don't know. I don't
want to pitch it to you right now, but
no, I just mean the fix it, the approved routes related fixes or semantic media. Anyway,
they moved the approved revision properties out of extra special properties and into a new extension called semantic approved revision.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I haven't had a chance to get that loaded into my production system yet, so I'm still playing with it.
So how is all the sign-off stuff being done now? I guess just offline.
Offline, yeah. That's a very soft way to say paper.
Well, yeah, okay, that's all right.
Yes, the goal is to get away from paper.
Yeah. Another interesting part of the setup you've created is a set of forms and templates so that people can create a whole hierarchical directory structure to put files into.
Yes.
What was the impetus for that?
Well, all of my users are familiar with network file shares, and the hardest thing about trying to get people to adopt the wiki as a place to store their files is the whole challenge of a flat file structure. Many people, if you think of the readme.txt file, there's on any given directory, there's probably 100 different readme.txt files. And the only reason that they're able to exist that way is because they're nested in folders that allow duplication of file name to exist. When you try to dump all those files into the wiki because it's a flat structure, you get the obvious problem that only one person can have a file called readme.txt. So what I started doing was there's a wonderful extension called Simple Batch Upload, and it has been modified to allow an automatic prefix so that you can create an upload button in a page that will allow you to upload an arbitrary number of files. And the only modification that this extension does is it allows me to give a prefix to those files. So readme.txt will then become a file in the wiki with a prefix that I define. And what I'm doing is I'm defining the prefix based on the wiki ID and the page ID. So if I put this upload button into a wiki called MyWiki, and I put this upload button into page 800, then the files that I upload into the wiki will be MyWiki 800-readme.txt. And then I have semantic properties that keep track of the page name, the base page name, and the full page name. And the hierarchical structure is managed as semantic data, whereas each page, as everybody knows, the pages are still a flat structure, just a single table of pages in the backend database that keeps track of them by ID. But each page that has the capability of uploading will upload with a unique prefix based on that page's unique ID. And I'll give a wonderful talk about this. I'm looking forward. This will be one of the talks that I look forward to giving at this year's Enterprise MediaWiki+Con in April.
I think having an ID instead of a hard-coded name for directories is a good idea because it lets you easily rename and move around directories without having to rename a whole bunch of files too.
Right. No, it's my original thought was to have the entire page article name prefixed. But then that, as you get into these really big nested systems, that became just way too much to have in front of the file name. And so by using just the article ID, no matter how deep you nest the folder structure, you still get the same size prefix.
Yeah, cool. So are people using it?
Absolutely. In fact, I would say that it was singularly the feature that allowed me to get full-time users.
Wow.
Prior to implementing this, I had people that just refused to put their data in the wiki, and then once I brought this online, they were in.
That's very interesting. Yeah, it would be great to have that published in one way or another, even if it's just, a series of how-to steps.
Sure.
There's no custom software involved in there, is there? It's just...
It's custom templates and custom.
Well, yeah, exactly. Right, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, in fact, maybe you can help me out. I've struggled with knowing what to call a collection of.
Right.
I know that Semantic MediaWiki and page forms will provide the special page called Create Class.
Right.
And that's a category, a form, and a template that work together to produce pages. But then when you have a collection of those things all working together as a tool. Is there a better name for that?
The usual term I've used is package. For a while, I guess maybe around 10 years ago, I thought, well, other people did too, but that there would become this set of standard packages that people could download to their wiki, to do various things, ERP or whatever else it is. But it never caught on. I mean, there have been a few people who have done that, but it hasn't caught on, and nobody's maintained their package or whatever it is. But
Sure.
I still think it makes a lot of sense. If you could create a package for that, I think it would be really cool.
That's the goal.
So what people? So in a sense, it replaces. We talk about MediaWiki as a SharePoint replacement, but it essentially replaces that SharePoint concept of a shared directory structure.
Absolutely. You get to create the equivalent of the nested folders in the file share, traditional network file share space is replaced by nested articles. So subpages is a prerequisite.
Yeah.
Then you rely on Semantic MediaWiki that each folder page is in a category called I think it's folder pages, and the name of the folder and its parent is what is kept track of semantically. So you can move whole, just like in the file share world, you can move whole folders at a time. You can move all the files that have been uploaded to a particular folder page simply by changing the parent page. You can move all the files. I mean, it's there's a little bit of a learning curve, but it's not hard.
Cool. That's really cool. I want to talk about something we talked about in person once, and stop me if I'm revealing any confidential information here. The first time we met in person was at the EMWCon in 2018, which was hosted by the Houston NASA people, appropriately enough. While we were there, we talked about you talked about the so-called Internet of Things, and you said that the whole enterprise MediaWiki/semantic MediaWiki system was missing out on a huge opportunity by not supporting it. I'm basically going from memory here.
Sure, something, yeah.
And you also said that within 10 years, the Internet of Things was basically going to be everywhere, something like that.
Sure.
I hope I'm not either misquoting you or revealing something I shouldn't.
Not at all.
Okay, so do you remember saying all of that?
Oh, absolutely. And the only thing that I'll add to it right now quickly is that this is all my own personal opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of the agency or any official organization.
So are you still a big believer in the Internet of Things, IoT?
Well, so yeah, I mean, I think the evidence is all around us. In the commercial world, everything is network addressable. Things that we never imagined would have IP addresses are now trying to get IP addresses.
Sure.
So I'm also a member of the IEEE Wireless Sensors for Extreme Environments group, and and so that's where my knowledge of the Internet of Things and basically with once we get this 5G network, when telecom achieves the holy grail of 5G, the idea is that every person is going to have, on average, 3 to 5 network addressable devices on their person. And when you walk into a building, it's just going to be a flurry of network addressable devices. And so the ability for these things to deposit information into some kind of a system is going to be central to managing all that. And so my vision and my hope is that you can have smart devices out in the field that can deposit small bits of data into wiki articles remotely through an API, and then that all that data, can be managed, can be displayed. You can do all the wonderful things that you can do with machine business intelligence on all those devices. And so the alternative is to ask some company to provide some super expensive solution that's going to cost a lot of money per year to maintain. And I think we can do that in the open source community. And I think MediaWiki is just perfectly poised to be that solution.
Does it have to be in a wiki? I mean, if it's all just machine generated data, where does the editing part come in?
Well, not so much the editing, and this is where the software breaks away from the traditional idea of a wiki being a place where people edit articles about things. So, for example, the health status or the configuration settings. So, if I have a smart device of any kind, and I want it to report its just some of its statistics. I'd like to push that into the wiki and see those edits made by the device as opposed to the user. So maybe the way to think about this is that traditional MediaWiki thinks of a collection of users that are humans that are contributing knowledge to the wiki, and I'd like to expand that thinking to the idea that machines are just as much contributors as people.
Sure. Yeah, and there certainly are wikis. Wikipedia being an obvious example or Wikidata actually being even better example where there's a combination of human and robot edits, for
Sure.
lack of a better word. I just it seems strange to have a wiki that's entirely populated by machine editing.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems like it's something you could just accomplish with a database table or something. I mean, obviously.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I mean.
Yeah. I'm certainly saying that but what we're trying to do is break down the silo walls, right? We're trying to create the advantage of the MediaWiki. Specifically, the semantic MediaWiki is getting everything into the semantic web. And so what I'm trying to do is, if all I wanted to do was aggregate all this device data into a database, then that would be fairly straightforward. What I would ultimately like to do is have it all available as open-linked data in a semantic database, which semantic MediaWiki would be.
Okay, so the semantic web part of it is important, or do you mean
the semantic web part of it is important?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on. Let's talk about the conference. EMWCon will be April 1st through 3rd, in just 3 months, I guess. 3 months.
Right.
Yeah. What are you hoping people will get out of it? People who attend.
Well, I hope that they will we're trying to build a community. I think that the enterprise MediaWiki users community is something that it's precious to me. And I say that because when I found it, prior to finding the enterprise MediaWiki community, I was sort of just a one person working on these things alone. And the specific challenges and the specific needs of an enterprise environment are, I think, different than the environment that maybe the Wikimedia Foundation might see trying to put their systems out into the public wild. So I think there's a very important distinction between what we'll call enterprise MediaWiki and what would non-enterprise be? Public?
Well, in the case of MediaWiki, enterprise is really just a synonym for not Wikimedia. Right. So
yeah. For all the people, right? So the Wikimedia Foundation very kindly made the MediaWiki code available to all, and so to discover that there are so many people using it on the dark web, right? Dark web being defined as behind some kind of a privacy wall.
Oh, okay. Didn't know where you were going with that. Yeah, okay.
Right. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and so forgive me if I'm using the term wrong. But to me, my understanding of the dark web is it's just the part of the web that is not publicly available.
No, that's not. I don't think that's what dark web is usually.
That's not what dark web means.
Yeah, I'm not. It's like some. I'm not even sure. It's non HTTP networks where you can get at stuff you're not supposed to get at, that kind of thing with Tor. No. Okay, now I'm revealing my ignorance. But anyway, yeah.
So then, what is the term to refer to all the content out there that the search engines can't find?
Oh, that's interesting. Offline? I don't know if offline is even the word.
Right. So
Lots of people laughing at us right now.
That's right. Which makes this an entertaining podcast.
Yes. I think
so. So I would say that the enterprise data that's out there is not, is everything that's not available on search engines.
Okay.
And so there's lots of enterprise data users, and there's lots of enterprise organizations. So what am I hoping?
I guess internal maybe is a better use.
Yeah,
better
the
word.
internal web, right? The plurality of internal webs. So there's so many internal web MediaWiki users out there, and I think they're all dealing with challenges that if we get together as a group and share our accomplishments and our lessons learned and our tricks, and we get to know each other and find ways to collaborate, then I think that we're better and we're smarter together than if we are just doing things on our own.
Yeah. You've been to, I think, the last two EMWCons. What are you hoping or thinking will be different or the same in this one?
Well, I really love the idea of the create camps. We'll to make this a proper conference. We certainly want to have 2 full days of talks, but we also know that lots of people will attend with burning questions on how to fix specific things on their particular systems. So I'm hoping that in addition to the talks, there will also be lots of opportunities for people to discuss what their specific challenges are and find people who are maybe some of the advanced users can share what they know to some of the new users, and even the advanced, I don't know where to locate myself. Sometimes I think I've learned a lot, and then all of a sudden I feel like I know very little. So everyone that I have met, I have benefited tremendously from, and if just a fraction of the people can walk away with that kind of positive experience, then it will have been a success.
Fantastic. I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be really good. And I think that's it. Anything else you want to talk about or mention?
Well, we should probably plug the NASA tour. And so, so for those that are on the fence about whether or not they want to attend EMWCon Spring 2020, we are pleased to announce that due to the proximity, right across the street is NASA Plumbrook Station. So some of those exciting space facilities that you heard me talk about at the beginning of the podcast will literally be within eyesight of the conference out the window. And we haven't really exactly picked the date yet or the evening, but we're absolutely planning to have everyone. I'm going to try to organize. I'm certainly going to organize a tour, and everyone that we can get to list themselves as attending will be added to a visitors list, and we'll go over to Plumbrook Station, and it would be my pleasure to show you guys around and let everyone see what wonderful things the agency is doing.
Cool. This might be too much to hope for, but will people be able to see that Orion spacecraft that's going into space? It's going to the moon?
Yeah, you never can tell.
All right.
It's a dynamic schedule. Right now, that spacecraft is inside of a chamber that no one can see into, except through TV screens in the control room. But it's not impossible that the spacecraft will be finished with its testing and not yet packaged up and sent on its way. And if we're so lucky, then yes, there's a very good chance it could be there.
Fantastic. Yeah. Great. Yeah, I'm sold. Cool. All right. Well, I think that's it for this podcast. Thank you very much, Rich. It was great talking to you.
Yaron, thank you.
And this has been another episode of Between the Brackets. I want to again thank my guest, Richard Evans of NASA. I hope you liked the episode, and see you next time.